Right, thank you everyone for coming in. I hope you guys are having a good day, and I'll just get started right away. I'm of the strong opinion that in today's society that if you give someone too much power, whether it be political office, law enforcement, or in this case, Hollywood celebrities, they will most likely abuse that power. I wanted to go through Bojack Horseman, someone who was a 90s sitcom star in his show, who had some victims of his own bad decisions. Instead of using the bad influences in his life, like his childhood and the Hollywood culture, he decided to use it as an excuse rather than something for good to learn from, and use the power he held in society as a way to victimize himself and excuse his bad behavior. Now, he had a lot of victims in his relationships, and a lot of them were women since he is a straight male in this show, but I wanted to focus on three main women: Gina Cazador, Penny Carson, and Sarah Lynn. The reason I chose these three is because they had a choice to speak out against Bojack Horseman, but they chose to remain silent, or they were forced to remain silent. The first victim I want to go to is Gina Cazador. She was a co-star with Bojack Horseman on the show Filbert, which was a gritty TV drama where they're both detectives. The relationship started as purely sexual. She didn't want romance, but later on, as they grew closer, they became romantic. However, during the second season shooting of the show, she noticed that Bojack was addicted to opioids, and he kept hallucinating and was paranoid. She decided she didn't want to be with him anymore if he was going to continue ruining his self-image and ruining his career. However, he does not take this criticism well and just continues to have opioid addiction. And unfortunately, his hallucinations went too far when he thought he was really Filbert in the show, and during a scene where he was supposed to choke the co-star Gina and her character, he begins to actually choke her out and physically assault her. Later on, they have to go on a show with Biscuits Braxy, someone who's known to shine light on Hollywood celebrities and make sure they're seen in the right light, to explain what really happened and excuse their behavior. When he's sober, he thinks, you know what, I'm going to be clear. I'm going to hold myself accountable, something that is a huge trend in Bojack Horseman. However, Gina Cazador says, no, I know how Hollywood culture is. They will see me as a victim rather than someone who can do her own shows. This show has been a tremendous help in my career, and rather than being seen as Bojack Horseman's victim, I want to be seen as someone who can do well in Hollywood. So she made the choice to stay silent. Unfortunately, this leads her to have some unresolved trauma issues. She is a good star for a lot of shows and a lot of movies. However, directors see her as hard to work with since she doesn't do well with surprises and has some trauma when she has to do some stunts. The next victim I want to go through is Penny Carson. Bojack left LA during season 2 to escape the culture and to go to New Mexico to visit a friend he once knew in the 90s, not realizing that she had a whole family now, one of them being her daughter, Penny Carson. He stays with them for a few months just to make it seem less weird and to escape his own lifestyle. When Penny struggles going to the prom, she doesn't have a date, and she wants to get in the face of some guy who rejected her. Bojack Horseman, being 50 years old, says, I'll take you to the prom. That's weird. Later on, after some misadventures with the prom, he takes Penny back home because he lives right next door to them in a boat. And she, being 17 years old, says, you know what, I'm ready. I want to have sex with you. The legal age of consent in New Mexico is 17. At first, he says no, and he goes to her mother, Charlotte, just to talk with her and reminisce about old times. He tries to get with Charlotte, but she rejects him and says, this isn't right, you need to get out of here. He goes back to his boat, and Penny Carson is waiting there. He invites her in, he lets her in, and they start to initiate having sex. Thankfully, the mother walks in before anything happens and tells Bojack to get out. Then the show glosses over this. Bojack comes back, and in the next season, when he's on a bender, which I'll talk about more later, he visits Penny at her college, and she recognizes him and goes, "What are you doing here? You need to leave. Why are you here? Why are you stalking me? I didn't know what I want. I was young." She knew it was wrong. And this isn't brought up again till the last season of the show, where there's an investigative journalist trying to figure out something about Bojack, which I'll get more into later. At first, Penny remained silent. However, when the investigative journalist came, she decided, maybe I should speak up, and she goes to her mom. This shows that she remained silent at first for her own choice, and she was influenced by her mother, Charlotte, who said, "You shouldn't speak out against it. Nothing good will come of it." However, she decided to still speak out when she could, and the show doesn't insinuate one way or another if it does anything. The last victim I want to go through is Sarah Lynn. She was a co-star of Bojack Horseman in his 90s sitcom when she was a child. When she hit her 20s, she became a famous pop star. And when she hit her 30s, she became burnt out and addicted to drugs. Bojack, seeing her struggle, decided to invite her in to live in his home and to have a weird father and daughter bond relationship, just like they had in the show. When that doesn't work, they decide to have sex. And later on, she does become sober. However, when Bojack is going through it, he decides, hey, let's make this sober person I know go through a bender with me. After a few months on a bender, she notices Bojack has a stash of heroin from a misadventure, and she takes some heroin. And unfortunately, she overdoses in a planetarium. Instead of calling 911 right away, Bojack decided to use her phone to act like she called him asking for help and waiting 17 minutes to call 911, where she overdosed and died in the hospital. So, these three victims either made the choice to stay silent or were forced to stay silent. Gina Cazador decided to make a choice for her internal conflicts and believing that culture will judge her. Penny Carson was influenced by her mother to stay silent, saying nothing good will come of it, yet it's insinuated that she didn't stay silent. And Sarah Lynn didn't have a choice. She died before she could have any voice against Bojack. This reinforces the idea that people who go through abuse in Hollywood culture do stay silent for multiple reasons. I researched the Harvey Weinstein scandal, and it showed that women tend to stay silent because they didn't want their career jeopardized. And many co-stars stayed silent because they didn't want their careers jeopardized. However, the show doesn't support this. The show, even though it follows Bojack's perspective, shows you how, to plainly put it, how shitty it was of him to do this. And thankfully, the show disrupts the idea that Hollywood celebrities can get away with it. The same person who interviewed Bojack and Gina when he was trying to say, oh, I didn't really choke her, decided to interview Bojack once the investigative journalist hired by Sarah Lynn's mother found out that Bojack was with Sarah Lynn when she died. At first, in her first interview, everything's fine. He makes himself the victim. He makes it, I'm misunderstood, and addiction is hard to get over, blah, blah, blah. However, the journalist comes to Biscuits Braxy and goes, this isn't right, and you know this isn't right. She later asks Bojack for another interview and hits him with all the allegations. How he went to New Mexico and took a young 17-year-old girl to prom. How he had a weird relationship with his publicist. How there was a weird thing happening with him and Gina Cazador. And how he waited 17 minutes to call the police when Sarah Lynn overdosed. And she decides to put it all into perspective and says, you have an imbalance of power over women. You have an imbalance of power over all of your relationships, and this is wrong. And thankfully, the show goes into detail on how badly Bojack is treated afterwards. Many fans like to throw drinks at him. Many fans are like, oh my gosh, it's Bojack Horseman. He sucks. And no one wants to put him in movies anymore. He's finally held accountable for his actions, and later on, he is jailed for breaking and entering. Bojack gets what he deserves. I wanted to bring this topic to you guys to really put it into perspective. There's going to be a lot of bad things that happen in life, and there are going to be people in position of power over you. And I hope this never happens, but you guys may experience an imbalance of power and be abused in your relationship. This show shows how negative it can be to stay silent and how it can really hurt you and hurt the people around you, even if you are influenced by them to stay silent. And I wanted to tell you guys, it's okay to speak up. People are always there for you. And this show is a prime example of how someone who could have been so loved by fans is finally getting what he deserves after he put a lot of people in a lot of bad situations. Thank you.